Welcome everyone to the latest edition of Startup Grind's Founder Series, where we educate our community on highly relevant early stage topics through interviews with founders of our top startups. Today's subject is from surviving to thriving as an early stage startup during COVID. Obviously a highly relevant topic for everyone, something that people can't stop talking about. But the goal of today's episode is to educate the founders in our community as normal about how Submer navigated the ups and downs of 2020 as a tech diverse company. And we'll be covering fundraising, hiring, building B2B or enterprise go-to-market strategy. So let's start with introductions. I'll give a quick introduction to myself and then we'll bring Paul in. I'm Alex Gordon-Furse, VP of Sales and Startups at Startup Grind, the world's largest startup community, educating, inspiring, and connecting pre-seed, seed, and Series A startups across 120 countries. Let's kick off. My guest today is Pol Valls, who's the co-founder and COO at Submer, a top 10 startup from our Europe Conference 2019. Paul, you're in Barcelona, right?
Indeed, I had to close my windows, otherwise you have too much sun coming through the window itself. But
you're running in.
Sorry for that.
Grey rain today. Whereabouts do you stay in Barcelona? Are you in the Gothic Quarter in the center, or are you further out?
No, actually today it's a crappy weather, I would say. So I had to close my windows because the weather is crappy. I'm outside now. Very recently I moved a little bit outside the city center because, of course, as you probably have done with COVID, you need to see a little bit more of the nature every now and then. So yeah, definitely. But very close to Barcelona.
Nice. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I think I told you every time I've met you, like, how's it over in Barcelona? Because I've been like 8 times, and every time I have the best experience. I just love it. It's a great place.
Thank you.
So let's start by maybe summarizing Submer in a couple of sentences, and then we can dive in from there. I know that what you do probably to a lot of people who are not in your space could be a bit, seem a bit complex. So could you summarize it maybe in a couple of sentences?
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of context, data centers and the internet infrastructure consumes a lot of energy, more than India in terms of electricity. It's crazy. And also an average data center consumes the amount of water in an Olympic swimming pool every 2 days. So there is a huge impact on sustainability and so on. So what we do at Submer is making data centers and the internet infrastructure more sustainable, more efficient, and more power dense. And what we did is basically develop what we call an immersion cooling technology, where we can submerge any kind of compute in our baths for compute. And this way we can basically maintain them operating in an order of magnitude more efficiency. So in the end, we save 50% of the operational costs, 50% on the capex of these expensive buildings, 99% of the water, and then 85% of the real estate space, thanks to the densities that we can achieve.
I love that. And I was just looking earlier before we started speaking, the TechCrunch article when you raised money back in September, and they summarized it as Submer is dunking servers in goo to save the planet.
Yeah, I mean, that could be another alternative pitch. Not sure if so much effective, but yeah, indeed, it's like a jacuzzi for compute. It's interesting when you see it because it's weird. You usually are told that you don't have to mix water with electronics, but of course it's not water. But yeah, it's interesting to see electronics in a liquid.
It does look, it looks sort of counterintuitive when you're watching the video and you see the electronics under the liquid. You're like, oh, but it's actually, obviously.
Exactly. You can see a lot of videos on YouTube, and it actually works.
Yeah, and I like the soundtrack you've chosen to a lot of your YouTube videos is nice as well. Sort of, kind of ethereal, relaxed.
Chill. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. When people enter a data center, it's crazy the noise it has.
Oh, really?
A lot of fans and air moving around, so it's very, very noisy. In our case, when you enter into a Submer data center or data room, you see that it's totally chill and no noise, so it's nice.
Nice. Well, those sensory kind of deprivation chambers are quite. It's quite a common, or I think it's quite a trendy thing over in Silicon Valley. Go in and sort of have sensory deprivation. It's almost like meditation. Maybe we could just go into a Submer data center and relax that way.
Yeah, maybe a future spin-off of Submer, some kind of meditation.
Exactly.
Business. I don't know. Let's see.
It works perfectly. So what drove your interest in this space? And I guess where was the idea born?
My background is on engineering, but more on the IT side of things and software. I had a background on product management, so I somehow understood the problem of creating products that actually people is willing to pay for, and how to find this product market fit. And I had some experience also building other projects, tech projects and startups. All failed, but I learned a lot in the process, and it was a very interesting learnings that I could apply when launching Submer, but also helping entrepreneurs at a somehow tech incubator in Barcelona. And with this experience of product management and the startup ecosystem, and also different kinds of technologies, together with my co-founder Daniel Pope, he's my brother-in-law, coincidentally enough, and this is usually something that it's not recommended. Please don't do business with your family members. In this case, worked out because we know each other for more than 20 years, and we have a very good relationship. We crossed the Mediterranean Sea somehow together, so we fit very well culturally, and we have this same somehow. We like to create things somehow, and 5 years ago during the summer we were bored, I would say, and he had a lot of experience on the data center space specifically because he had his own, back in the day, a data center that was acquired by Telefonica in 2009,
okay.
When they were doing these mergers and acquisitions before the cloud providers came to the European region and so on.
Yeah.
And we basically thought or saw that still there is a lot of inefficiencies in the market in terms of electricity consumption, in terms of these trends in what is known as edge computing, and having more data centers next to the end users for avoiding these weird overlaps when someone speaks and the other answers, and these milliseconds when you are talking about machines and so on. So milliseconds are critical. And we saw a set of problems there, and we started thinking about how to solve those.
Amazing. So could you, I think it would help as well just to get a couple of use cases. I know that you guys have got some pretty well-reputed customers, even the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. I think they work with you a little bit, Airbus. Could you just kind of explain a little bit how it works in practice and how they're using it?
Yeah, so we have, of course, different types of customers, from corporates like Airbus, as you mentioned, hyperscalers, cloud providers, enterprises, telcos, and so on. And the idea is that either a traditional data center, for instance, you usually see these aisles of racks with big air conditioning systems pushing air from the bottom and on those raised floorings and so on. So these kind of buildings can be optimized a lot by using our technology. So whenever you have to do a new server room, you can save a lot of money and operational costs by implementing the Submer technology. And instead of having these racks, you have these somehow also racks, but filled with our liquid and our management system. And from there, basically, so what we see is the use case on data centers, traditional data centers, up to the higher end of the spectrum with hyperscalers, where we are starting to work with. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have the edge computing, as I was saying. So now we recently released what we call the micropod, which is a self-contained, very compact solution that basically has our own, of course, different pieces of technology put together in such a way that it's very useful for telcos, for instance, for deploying 5G networks into small spaces, into cell towers, in retail stores, and having compute capacity at the edge for offering these lower latency applications. So from the far edge to the hyperscale and anything in between.
Amazing. So my understanding, because I know that obviously there are lots and lots of different data center providers. I know that I think Microsoft were testing out immersing the data centers in cold ocean water in Scotland. I know that the water is very cold in Scotland. I always make sure I swim because that's what Scots do, irrespective of how cold it is. But I'm guessing the obviously they're kind of achieving the eco objective in that it's potentially consuming less energy and so on and so forth. Except it's not high density, and it's not, you can't transfer that closer to the edge, right? So you guys are doing it in a smaller space, and you're able to kind of also serve the use case of edge computing as well.
Yeah, Microsoft did a very exciting experiment, and it's a very nice also PR stand, I would say, because it's very surprising to see this kind of submarine with compute being submerged. But in the end, what we've been able to do with our technology is making something even, I would say, more efficient somehow in terms of how to basically the operational costs of running this infrastructure, but also in terms of easiness to deploy and flexibility to deploy. It's just a box that you can place anywhere. This means that you can, of course, place it at the edge or next to the user bases and city centers and so on. You can also leverage synergies with the heat that we generate. So since we always operate in a liquid form, we don't have this heat exchanging process between air inside the Microsoft capsule. They have some kind of air environment. It's not the traditional air, but they have, I think, a special gas inside. But it's air to liquid. We always operate in liquid form because we submerge directly the electronics. So we can capture the heat much more efficiently, and we can leverage the circular economy by reducing the heat for other purposes like heating buildings, in just industrial processes or district heating, so that you can see these synergies with your local businesses or things nearby the data center. No? So in the end, what we did is something that is a little bit more efficient, but also with all the benefits on the capital expenses, on the flexibility of location, on the circular economy, et cetera, et cetera.
Amazing. And so, competing against, these behemoths of industry, what is like, maybe you can't tell us, but what is the reason why, other people haven't been able to do it to the same extent that you necessarily have so far?
Well, I would say we are not competing. We are not competing with Microsoft, of course. We are not competing with Amazon Web Services nor Google or all these hyperscale players. We don't want to compete with them. We want to be basically a piece of the puzzle that helps them be more efficient, more sustainable, and more dense. And we build this set of technologies that allow these kind of hyperscalers, but also enterprises and traditional data centers and edge deployments to be more sustainable. No? So in the end, we try to be something aligned with their interests. And we are actually participating in what we call the Open Compute organization, which is the organization that Microsoft, Facebook, and so on created back in the day. And now a lot of companies joined by basically sharing know-how and participating in how the technology trends could go in the data center space. And basically, this allows us to be aligned with everyone's interest in that regard. But in the end, it's a complementary technology that we can somehow keep adding more and more efficiency to your data center in a progressive way also. So we see total somehow new builds using our technology, but we also see hybrid environments, and we will be being in the coming years in hybrid environments where we see traditional racks with networking and storage with our highly dense and efficient tanks with the compute and where the data is crunched. No? So yeah, it's a nice, interesting times, I would say.
Amazing. So, and you guys have obviously raised a Series A this year, but going back to the early years in 2015, 2016, how did you guys approach taking your concept to market? Because I know that at the moment, as you mentioned, there's lots of different use cases, different industries for your product, but where did you start?
We started by just having nothing but a pitch. During that summer, what we did is put together, I would say, crappy pool that we inflated and put some water in and some broken electronics just to demonstrate the concept, because we knew that there were already some, even from the 60s, from IBM, from certain supercomputers, mainframe computers that used mineral oils to refrigerate certain parts of the electronics. So we knew that was possible, but we didn't have our own technology yet. It was just the way we wanted to implement this technology in such a way that we add an abstraction layer to the complexity and exoticness of it. No? So what we did is just exemplify it for pitching. Back in the day, we pitched at YC and among 6,500 companies, we end up being in the last 100 companies and interviewing with the partners and so on. We didn't end up in the batch, but it was a very enlightening moment to understand that this potentially had a lot of interest also from as a business, not just an engineering crazy idea. And this motivated us to basically move forward with real prototypes. Because the feedback that we received was positive, but the things that were somehow more negative could be solved by just advancing in our development and understanding better the technology and the product market fit and so on. So we started developing very initially crappy and simple prototypes, single server prototypes with different fluids, different mechanical parts. So we initially started sourcing different fluids existing from the market, from again mineral oils, from electrical transformers, vegetable oils, distilled water, even, and some other kinds of fluids, so that we could test how non-conductive were, but also how inert to the hardware were. And from those early prototypes, we could learn a lot. We could start somehow showing something. We convinced a couple of retired engineers from the more industrial side of things and thermodynamics. So this was a very nice synergy, because back in the day, of course, we didn't had money to invest, apart from, of course, a few savings that we put to do the initial prototypes. And we didn't know the physics or the thermodynamics side of things. We came from the IT side of things and the software and so on. So we understood the problems, we understood the market, but the technology behind how to implement a very efficient and somehow sustainable and so on solution, it was something that we were able to join forces with these retired people that were somehow their hobby to help us, which was very good. Of course, we ended up having like a collaboration down the road, but in the end, it was, in the beginning, it was just as simple as that. And from that, we kept growing these small prototypes towards more real size, apparently real prototypes, or prototypes that you can see in a data center, and as a decision maker, you can perceive as something that, hey, this looks nice, this can be side by side a regular rack somehow. We even entered in an agreement with a local data center so that we could put this prototype in a data center, so that we could show it in a real scenario. And this way we kept scaling the conversations, kept scaling the business development activities, the potential partners, the potential, in some cases, investors. But in the end, we also tried to listen a lot. So we didn't bias the conversations when people approached the system. We wanted to hear all the positive, but also especially the negative feedback. So we were listening, we were understanding the pain points, we were understanding how people, even without saying nothing, were interacting with the system, and how they opened the door at the lids and whatever. And with that somehow subjective know-how, we kept feeding it up into our pipeline of ideas and so on. And whenever we start having, probably you will ask for that later, but more resources and funding and so on, we already had an envision on where to go with the product, and we already had somehow certain people in the background already pitched in terms of what we were doing, and potential team members. So whenever we unlocked money, we could quickly hire them and start scaling the product and technology.
That's amazing. So even though it seems like a very kind of, I guess, resource intense, and obviously it's a hardware business, it's potentially more tangible than other things, but it's quite a typical startup story of kind of starting before you've really got anything, allowing people to touch and feel what your idea is and your concept, even if it's not real, and then iterating fast based on feedback.
One of the things that I was afraid was, hey, now we are going to spend thousands and thousands of euro in building a prototype that we don't even exactly know if this will work or not, and that's people will be willing to pay for it. No, so initially I was very, very concerned on product market fit. I faced the failures of not having product market fit. So I knew the pains of building something because you are an engineer and you love the geek stuff, and you start building things because of your fancy ideas, but then nobody actually uses it or buys it. No? So I was especially obsessed with that at the beginning, and we iterated from, again, a fake prototype or just a concept to something that you can see and touch at a small scale to something that you can see at a bigger scale. But yeah, it was a progressive way. And now when you see what we do and you see the website and the portfolio, you say, wow, I hope that people somehow, some of them say, wow, this is interesting, or this looks cool, or whatever. But in the end, it's been a very iterative process and not something that came just of our ideas. We are not geniuses, or we are not magicians. What we did is basically listen a lot and try to iterate on what we heard from customers and the market.
Yeah, you let the market lead you, I guess, and had tight feedback loops and kept building. That's a great way to do it. So obviously we talked a little bit about some of the big name customers you've got. What does a typical sales process look like for you?
It is intense. It is, as you can imagine, this is not a retail product. It's not a B2C company. We are talking about enterprise customers, big companies. They have their own procurement processes. They have their own, in some cases, tenders. We deal with also government institutions and public entities. So we have to deal with this kind of massive documentation and tenders. But in the end, what we do is have a deal flow of opportunities coming through either organically through our website as an inbound, because we actually are building something that the market is looking for, and we are getting this traction organically, but also now that we have more resources doing some outbound, and I will talk about this later probably, but we used to do some physical events and so on before COVID, but also marketing campaigns, etc., etc. No? So this kind of more outbound strategies to generate this pipeline of opportunities, and then we have sales executives that can guide from these marketing efforts, help qualifying from a marketing qualified lead towards a more sales qualified lead, and from there we have solution architects and sales engineers that can understand deeply the problem of the customer and the technological somehow implementation that would fit best them. So by grabbing our portfolio of products, configuring them to make sure that they solve the problem, because in the end we have of course a modular and productized solution. As a startup, we wanted this scalability, but in the end you have different configurations. You have to understand what kind of hardware they are deploying, where are they deploying the technology, the facility, the floor plan, etc., etc. So we have a set of engineers that can do that. And then we have service delivery managers that are in charge of making sure that what we say is actually implemented and deployed, and it's basically approved by the customer. And what we see also is that customers usually they are very conservative in this space, even though they are tech companies, and they are perceived as very innovative, of course, front facing. In their kitchen, they have to be very conservative, and they have to be very somehow aware of what they are putting in their actual data centers and so on. So they tend to be, at least in the past, were very skeptical, but of course now it's much easier because we have already a portfolio of customers, we have a very solid technology and so on. But at the beginning was a very important challenge or friction to surpass. The idea is that we have to convince the decision maker in terms of finance and numbers, or executive decision maker, and also the technical decision maker. And this is the guys, not only the CTO, but also the guys, this is admins dealing with the hardware. So it is an interesting balance, and you have to set the right expectations with one and the others to make sure that you don't get blocked by one or the other, and you keep moving forward in the right direction with both. In some cases, we start dealing with the company from the C-level, more at the executive side of things, and they say, hey guys, please look at this because this seems interesting, and they convince the technical people to take a look at what we do. And the other way around, maybe we see or we meet a technical person on an event or doing networking or whatever, and these guys saw our technology and perceive it as something interesting and start evaluating it under technical terms, and then we have to scale the organization or move around the organization to find the decision maker in terms of the budget allocation and so on. So it's difficult to navigate, and the idea is that you have to convince, of course, both or all the different stakeholders involved, and then we have to make sure of the timing, budget, and decision making somehow being identified, so qualifying correctly. And then what happens with in our case also is that we have a technology that it is somehow a piece of equipment that you have to start using. It is again something that people feel a little bit conservative when implementing new technologies in a data center. So they usually start by a small installation. This was more in the past. Now we are seeing an evolution of that. But at the beginning, it was, hey, let's put the foot on the door. Let's start with a smaller scale installation. And from there, what we've seen is that customers are doing follow-up or follow-on purchase orders. So this is very interesting. And it was a very nice milestone for us to see that customers not only bought once, but kept buying more machines and increasing the data center. So the customer success and making sure that the delivery of those initial installations are perfect and basically following with the customer, their questions, their needs, whatever, to make sure that they keep buying more units. No? And now what we are seeing is that we are getting more bigger installations from day one, because they already know that the technology works. They see other customers using it, and they basically go for a bigger installation.
That's amazing. I mean, it sounds, anyone who's watching this who works in a sort of B2B or enterprise sales space, a lot of what you explained there will have made a lot of sense to them. A lot of commonalities, even if I guess you're selling a software product, it's still navigating a large organization, trying to start with maybe senior decision makers, getting them to pass you down to people who can kind of talk you through the process. All of that sort of makes sense. I guess one thing that I'm interested in kind of learning a bit more about is, COVID this year, people have not been able to physically interact, in close proximity like they used to before. I'm imagining that the most high value, high impact part of your sales process is actually, involved. It has to involve physical interaction between you, because people actually testing it out, even if it's a sort of a smaller installation, it requires you and, a transfer of like a physical item, and then you guys, I guess, being there physically with them. How has that part been impacted this year for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it is something that generates a little bit more complexity on all this soup of things that you have to take into account. But I would say we did quite a lot of sessions, remote sessions we have in Barcelona we have a factory. We also now have a manufacturing capacity in the US and so on, but we have our main manufacturing facility in Barcelona where we can show everything and we can somehow explain and have all the tools, and we have all the different models of the product and so on. So we did plenty of sessions for onboarding customers or demoing customers in such a way that they can understand how a person physically interacts with the systems. No? So it's a matter of making sure that we can train them. We have been working a lot on documentation to make sure that we have material for these customers. And then we have a distributed network of locations that are publicly available somehow, because usually, of course, data centers, or in most of the cases, they don't want to open doors, or it is a very confidential area. But we had this option of having certain showrooms so that we can bring people maybe in the US, in Asia, and so on, Nordics, etc., so that they can see in real life the technology. But of course, before we had a lot of events, we attended, I was traveling a lot, showcasing the technology, speaking with people physically and so on. And now we changed radically the approach, and we just, of course, do a few events. A couple of weeks ago, we were at GITEX Dubai, for instance. It was one of the first events of the year, physical events. But this will change, or at least we see that virtual events can bring something, but are of course much less effective than physical events, for us at least, because we have this physical product.
Yeah.
And what we do is combine it with other strategies, again, like the showrooms, digital channels, and bring this pipeline of opportunities, or feeding these opportunities to the sales guys that then can demo the people remotely. We have also field engineers that whenever we have to do a deployment, they physically can go there and help people integrate the technology and so on. But yeah, we try to combine this phygital experience of having our own physical deployments and with cameras and with people interacting with it in real time while someone is asking questions, or we can basically demo it live, no? And yeah, I mean, we are now in January, actually, we have what we call the Submer experience. So it's our own event. So since we saw that the events are changing and so on, and we don't have much control over those, we just thought about creating our own event. And since it is a phygital event, we have a control over our physical area, and we can showcase the technology, but then we can expose to the audience through the internet and so on, and be interactive. So what we are doing is a week of different meetings, private meetings with corporations. So what we are doing is private meetings with certain partners and strategic customers and so on, and then a public session that everyone can join. So if you visit our website, I think we have a section where you can see it, or on our social media, and it will be during the beginning of the year. And it's a way of somehow complementing these physical events and these other channels that we had to diversify. So at the beginning, before COVID, we were working a lot in events and attending a lot of physical events because of this physical side of things, but then now diversifying a lot.
It's really interesting. I think, you know, again, I've interviewed a lot of people about remote work and obviously how COVID has affected the way that they have, you know, their team cohesion and so on and so forth. And we'll probably come on to that a little bit later on. But one thing that's definitely become more common knowledge, I guess, is that actually the fact that people are kind of spread more, you know, across the world, and therefore in different time zones, and therefore a lot of communication has to be kind of asynchronous. The advantages of really well-written long-form content to actually explain things has started to be kind of more commonly known. So I guess with you guys, actually, you know, has COVID kind of provided you with alternative insights into how better you can help people installing, you know, your compact data center solutions through, yeah, as you said, long form content like written documentation, and also these videos that you're saying where people can kind of watch them back, where you're physically showing them and they can then just implement that once the kind of actual unit has been sent to them. Have there been kind of new opportunities for you guys where you can see how you can reduce friction in your sales process by taking more of those asynchronous approaches?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things that are interesting, and people realized that a lot of the stuff that they were doing and traveling a lot, probably it's not so necessary. So that's interesting, because probably it will make more efficient certain things. And if we, on the other hand, also learn on how to document better and generate this interactive content or content that then you can replay, and it is a more scalable approach in some sense, no? So you can reach more of the long tail of partners or the long tail of customers by having this packaged information, no? But of course, having a physical interaction or this dedication to a specific partner or customer also gives us, in an enterprise company, that you don't play with the economies of scale of having many small customers, but you have big customers, and not many of them. Of course, having this relationship is very important. So we have to somehow complement this with some more personal touch and more real connections that we can do, no? So now we have the lack of also having people already in different geographies, so we can leverage these people locally establish these relationships, more physical relationships or more close relationships. And we try to also work, for instance, in this event. So we have different days of the week, including Sundays, because in the Middle East they work in Sundays. So we had to do every day some sessions and in different time slots and so on. So we distributed our team in these different time slots and these different days. And then an interesting thing that happened also is that since people is not traveling all day around, at least the decision makers or C-levels that usually are attending meetings and events and so on, we've been able to put some of these people that it's difficult to reach in the same virtual table during this time. So since they are not traveling so much, we found slots and the capacity of interacting with people that otherwise probably is less accessible. But virtually, it's more possible to make them speak with you somehow. No?
Yeah.
So
less time in their day, I guess. The actual element of traveling to have a meeting is not there anymore. So they can say, well, I've got a 30-minute slot, and it's easier to get them just for that 30 minutes.
Exactly. So in some cases, also it was beneficial in that regard, and we were able to take a step back in some areas of the sales side of things and go to market in such a way that we could establish partnerships that maybe in the short term we would be focusing in closing certain deals or big opportunities and so on that could give a short-term return, but with this capacity of establishing these partnerships and sitting the right people in the virtual table, we were able to set the basis for a more scalable a partnership. So establishing partnerships with OEMs, with hardware manufacturers, with system integrators, distributors, etc., etc. And this is something that we've been advancing a lot.
So getting that senior buy-in potentially earlier on in the sales process than you would have been able to previously, because you can have those virtual interactions with them. That's
yeah, I think in some cases it got easier to be able to have a slot with them, no?
And it shrinks the sales cycle, I guess, as well. If you've got senior buy-in earlier on, then you can then interact with the more junior people, I guess, or the less senior people about the actual intricacies and the practicalities of how it will be implemented, how it will be used, how it could be scaled, because they know that the senior person is already bought in because they've spoken to you earlier in the sales process.
Yeah, I mean, it of course affects the different things. Then you face other challenges, and you face the challenge maybe down the road of I don't know, certifying whatever piece of equipment they want to use and so on, or put I don't know, a more engineering practical experiment in the loop because they want to test whatever. So in the end, you face other challenges, but I think it gets. Somehow you get these benefits while other things, of course, get affected. No, but all in all, I think the at least for us, it is something that it's not so negative because we are in the technology space. Everyone is putting the focus on digitalization and so on. And in the short term, we saw, as everyone, certain effects of that because certain customers, for instance, we had certain customers from the oil and gas industry. And of course, these guys are in a wait and see situation, or some customers that just in terms of their infrastructure or on their purchasing side of things, they are also in a wait and see situation, and they want to keep the cash in and just avoid spending money and anything, and just waiting a little bit on this situation to pass. But all in all, everyone is focusing on digital communication, remote working, scaling their software stack, and behind the software stack, you have something to run it, and so we have I would say the interesting part of a physical product because people is more willing to pay for something that they can touch and see and see the value that it brings, but also is leveraged by the growth of the software, the hyperscalers and the cloud. No, so in the mid long term, this is a boost for what we do. No?
Yeah, exactly. It's a growing market, right? So you guys are hopefully picking up in a growing market. So and coming into fundraising, obviously a kind of relevant point in the conversation to bring that in. You guys have raised just over $17 million across 4 rounds, I think, between 2017 and now. I think 12 million of that was raised on your Series A in September. with Norsken leading, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. So Norsken is a Stockholm-based VC from the Norsken Foundation, which was founded by the co-founder of Klarna. So
yep.
Nicholas and he basically they wanted to build this impact fund. So not only focused on companies that of course have a very high growth potential and somehow generate a lot of business, but also the sustainability side of things is very, very important. So it was very aligned with our interest, and I thank them for leading the round, especially in these weird times. So it was a very nice fit. But it wasn't. It was very difficult to find this fit and close the round, as you can imagine. So
yeah.
before the COVID, we envisioned the Series A as something more or less not easy, because it's never easy, I imagine, but more or less the standard 6 months of raising the round and then speaking with a few investors, and whenever you start seeing this traction, if you need to complement it with the money, so you will at least have a lead investor, and then you can configure the round and so on. It's never easy, of course, but we were in a very sweet time with a lot of with a very good end of 2019. Everything looked fantastic, but then of course started COVID, and we were just starting to pitch. Actually, when I was in London with you doing these Spitfire pitches and so on,
yeah.
We were just starting communicating and pitching that we were looking at the Series A and so on, but we didn't even had
in 2019, right?
Exactly, it was 2019. At the end of 2019, we were just exploring. We didn't have even the term set. It was, hey, we know that we want to do a Series A, but still, let's try to meet more investors, no? And it was a nice opportunity to do so, of course. But we didn't have the round basically officially set, nor the terms. And the idea was to do it during 2019. So we started during 2020, and we started doing it during 2020. At the Q1 2020 is when we said, okay, these are more or less, or these are the terms that we feel comfortable and so on. Before the Mobile World Congress here in Barcelona, we had a plan for meeting with investors. We already scheduled a few calls. We had our own tour because we are next to the trade fair, so it was very easy to not only have a booth there, but having a tour in our facilities, and it was very exciting. And boom, then the Mobile World Congress was cancelled.
It's all lined up. It sounds like it was all lined up so well. And
yeah, and everything has started somehow falling apart under the perspective of the plans that we had, not the company, but because we were lucky to have, of course, traction and kept moving forward. But the plans that we had basically didn't work out. So instead, what we did is try to leverage this somehow asynchronous way of working and this distributed way of working, and try to leverage the capacity of reaching out to people outside the physical somehow capacity of getting in touch with. So trying to leverage our network, trying to leverage our existing investor, which was or is Mundi Ventures. Mundi Ventures are actually a lot of thanks also to, or many thanks to Mundi Venture to trust in us back in the day in our seed stage, and basically leveraging their network, leveraging our network and the people that we were meeting. Of course, people like you in Startup Grind that help entrepreneurs finding these potential investors and partners and so on, and basically increase as much as possible the funnel, the top of the funnel. And I was all day having calls, one next to each other, optimizing my pitch, and it was basically every day filling my agenda with conversations all over the world. I spoke with Asia, US, Europe, etc., etc. And I had plenty of, I would say, bad experiences in the sense that we we basically got a few investors very excited, and some of them already verbally telling us, hey, we want to invest in you, we want to lead the round even. And I had like 3 or so that ended up falling just at the last minute, or when having or close to the term sheet, it didn't went through. So it was very frustrating.
Was that because just the uncertainty just continued, and so they just said we have to focus on our existing business, we don't want to take on any new portfolio companies at the moment?
Exactly. This is the typical feedback that we received, having to focus on their own portfolio, or being slower than usual and saying, okay, let's see if this passes or so. I want to see you in person, for instance. They culturally wanted to meet us in person before having even the term sheet, or they wanted us to, or they had a different expectation, or we had a different expectation, and we thought that it was clear, but it wasn't clear, or they changed certain things or aspects of the high level terms at the very end of the conversation with the excuse of this uncertainty. So we had I had quite a few frustrating interactions. But in the end, we met Nochken. They were very excited. They didn't show us physically, but they knew someone that physically saw our technology facilities and did the due diligence. So they shared somehow part of this know-how and experience with us, and this helped us moving forward with them. And then we got also an interesting co-investor from the US, which is a high net worth individual that felt the pains of operating data centers and understood very well the pains of the data center infrastructure, and was willing to co-invest. So we end up getting the money from the Nordics and so on, and with these values of sustainability and impact that are very aligned with us. So very happy for that. And then also diversifying geographically with an investor in the US, which was very exciting for us also for our expansion and our US entity there and so on. But it wasn't an easy journey, and it took much longer than expected. It was much more stressful than expected, and it was like a roller coaster, as you can imagine.
I mean, I guess one thing that has hopefully come from that, if you started with a larger top of the funnel than you would have otherwise done, you've built a huge network of potential future investors, right? Who know about your business. You've already pitched to them, and now that you've raised your Series A, if you have a strong next kind of, as you said, like 6-12 months, you can kind of tap those people up much more quickly than you would have otherwise been able to.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I have my own CRM of investors now, but in the end, also you have to think that we were focusing there are a lot of investors that focus on seed and Series A.
Yeah, so you're maybe past them now almost.
Exactly. So there are quite a lot of investors that maybe are now a little bit out of the sweet spot, and others that we were earlier in their journey. So of course we are following up with those and so on, and we know that there are some of them that can go up to the even private equity and mega rounds. No, so but of course the subset of investors that will be interested in a Series B, for instance, is a portion only of the ones that we were in touch before, and then we also and probably this is for the sake of being able to amplify our message and diversify and so on, we probably in some cases of course I try to focus and make sure that we target the right investors that invest in the space and so on. But as you can imagine, as a deep tech somehow, or a startup that has hardware, software, chemical, robotics, and all kinds of skill sets and so on, and it's a product that it's physical, it has industrialization and so on. So the typical VC focused on software as a service or B2C or etc., which is, if you look at the majority, then we have a more complex time. So it wasn't easy to find investors that were broad enough to look into our space, even though, of course, they saw it as something, hey, this seems interesting and so on. But I'm sorry, this goes out of my my interest or my sweet spot or whatever. And I had a lot of also frustrating conversations in that regard. I hope that in the future we will see more either VCs like Noken that focus on sustainability and impact and are more diverse in terms of technologies, and they don't care if it is more deep tech or software or whatever, but just having this sustainability vector, or more VCs looking for a diversified portfolio or technologies more into this space. Because in the end, again, you can run a lot of software apps and so on, but behind those apps, you still need the compute, you need the physical wall to run it, and it has a huge impact. So hopefully we'll see more and more of those.
Well, I think it makes it all the more impressive that you managed to raise the round, given all the circumstances that you mentioned, and you know the fact that your product has all these different kind of elements to it, and that the pool of VCs you could even approach was smaller. So super happy to see that for you guys. So and for anyone watching, you know, what were maybe some kind of industry or technology agnostic lessons that you learned that would maybe be relevant for people watching? You obviously mentioned like you adapted by trying to approach a larger top of the funnel than you would have otherwise approached. What are, you know, are there any other, you know, just a couple other kind of major learnings that you think other people could benefit from your process?
I try to standardize somehow I mean standardize, but has like I try to have a pool of material and slides and somehow a hidden data room of information that I know that I would be requested. Of course, it was an iterative process also. Whenever someone asked a new thing, I increased this stack of information, no? But having this set of information that I could quickly move around and have control over, of course, the confidentiality and IP side of things, because we also have to deal a lot with that. But with, of course, frustrating the interest of the investor and to a point where it makes sense sharing the right things in the right time. So setting up, not only filling the agenda with events, but also having this ready material to quickly scale the conversations and quickly understand if it is a go or no go. And if it is a go, then let's share more material, or we end up signing an NDA if necessary. Again, depending on the company, this doesn't make sense and it will be a friction on the process. In our case, that we have to share certain patent stuff or something like that. But having these materials in a scalable way that you can quickly move forward and discard the conversations that go nowhere or advance the ones that go somewhere. This was something important. And in our case, of course, we had to deal with some demos and due diligence regarding the product. So we had to do some video conferencing with that. But just if you are a software company, you probably have to do demos with the sharing your screen and showing your dashboards or whatever. So having of course this set demo that you already optimize over time, it also helped qualifying the investors quickly, and try to align the momentum with those and make sure that one problem that we faced at the beginning is that since we started more in this teasing or experimental way, just testing how we could approach certain investors or see the feeling and the sense of the market, because we weren't in a rush. Suddenly we were in a rush, not because we were running out of money, but because the uncertainty of the market, and we wanted to close the round, and we didn't know how long it would take the COVID and so on. So we had to specifically set a clear message in terms of this is the terms, something realistic. Of course, we had to compare the different inputs that we received and feedback from investors and say, okay, this is what we think it can work. This is the message that we want. This is the ideal kind of partners that we will look for, and getting better over time. So testing the probably not so relevant investors at the beginning, and then leave the most promising ones later on, because you will already have all the materials ready and all the message much more clear and so on. and iterate as quickly as possible and as a process somehow. And then yeah, having this pitch that then I could share, and depending on the investment criteria of each of the investors, I had this bag of extra slides that I know that I could merge in the main deck to get more attention for this particular investor. For instance, if we know that this investor is interested in clean tech, I may put some more slides on regarding the, I don't know, district heating and reusage of heat and this sustainability aspect. And on the other hand, if I see that there is an investor very or more financial focused and so on, maybe more extra slides on the financials, etc., etc. So having this extra bag of content that I could easily merge and customize for having a pitch deck that then, or conversation that it's more tailored to them. Yeah, more or less at a high level, this is some of the things that we did.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think, yeah, having the appendix that you can pull from depending on who you're speaking to, personalizing those slides is certainly a way. It seems like all of those things are catered to essentially, yeah, reduce friction wherever it's possible in a process that's already going to take a long time, right? Because there's that level of uncertainty, you know, people, I guess, yeah, wanting, or investors wanting to kind of be more conservative, take longer of a due diligence if they can't meet you in person. All those things help to just reduce the friction where possible.
Yeah, if looking at taking a step back and looking back, I also see a lot of, or recognize a lot of conversations that we dedicated a lot of time, a lot of time and materials and so on to certain conversations that didn't end up anywhere, and this is frustrating. But on the other hand, I think if we didn't do that for all of the set of investors, maybe I would miss some of the interesting ones that move forward eventually. No, so probably what I could have done better is qualifying earlier the interest, but also probably because of the being afraid of losing opportunities, you want to keep going on and you want to make sure that you have many options on the table and so on. But if you don't qualify quickly, then you eventually end up losing a lot of time and you face this challenge at the end. So if I had to do something different, I would probably do a better qualification at the beginning, but in a good way somehow, trying to avoid knocking down certain conversations that eventually can go positively. So with the right handling of it, which is probably not easy, and it's something that it's not maybe very objective, but trying to qualify initially, of course, the typical investment criteria, the ticket size, the kind of technologies that you are focused on and so on. So you discard quickly the typical things. But then in the more subjective things like timing or the fit with the partners and so on, try to scale quickly on that to make sure that you focus on the ones that make sense. But again, you have the good thing of being able to diversify on all regions in theory, because you can virtually have these conversations remotely. So just try to leverage as much as possible your network from others that can help you get in touch with people in the US, in Europe, in whatever, and increase the capacity, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing the alignment or the similarities I often find, you know, the fundraising process and a solid sales process, right? Like qualifying out is almost more important sometimes than qualifying in, because like, if you're qualifying out effectively, then you can spend more time on the people that you know there's a much higher chance of closing. But as you say, sometimes you want to keep your options open because, you know, a conversation that's not directly relevant could lead to a conversation that's directly relevant. So it's a difficult trade-off. And as you say, like hindsight is 20/20. So it's always easier to look back and say, I could have done that. But at the time, you don't know.
Yeah, of course. And honestly, I don't know if it would work out if I did it that way. But probably since the frustration was so big later on, in some cases, at least I would try to qualify a little bit better, depending on the things. But you never know. You never know. And again, some investors that may not invest now, maybe invest later, or they have someone that, hey, I like you, I like what you are doing, but for now I don't have still my fund closed, or I don't have the right timing for me, but please speak with this other fund here. And sometimes I got interesting introductions with investors that passed, which is interesting because the typical recommendation to the startup ecosystem is, hey, don't leverage the investors that passed on you to get other connections. But depending on the reason, if they passed not because they don't like you, but because it is something related to their timings or their whatever, but they find you interesting, they can probably introduce you someone which is relevant and that will be excited by the message that this third party gives. Otherwise, of course, don't get recommended by someone that passed on you because they don't trust in your business or future. No?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much for that. You know, so we're coming closer to the end now, but I just want to touch on hiring and your processes for that and how that's sort of changed this year, team management, things like that. You guys have got offices in, I think, Virginia, Silicon Valley, and Barcelona. Is that right?
Yeah, we have people in the West Coast, in the East Coast, in Barcelona, of course. Regarding the offices, we have this space or office, I would say physical office, more for a commercial, of course, having a commercial address in somewhere in the US, but also having this manufacturing capacity. So we are manufacturing in the US already, and we ship from there to our customers there, reducing lead times and costs and so on. But in terms of the people working from there, now it doesn't make sense. So what we have is people working remotely in Silicon Valley, in the East Coast, near New York and North Virginia, where we have the data center alley, very hot spot for data centers, in the middle of the US, in Texas, and then in the Nordics, in Europe, in Amsterdam, in Dubai, and now we are starting to have people in Asia. But the idea is that, again, we try to leverage the positive things of COVID, in the sense that since everyone is working already remotely, we can have people more distributed, and we can maybe have people that is more close to certain customers or showrooms, or know the local culture. And since we are dealing with this enterprise sales funnel, knowing how they operate and this more personal understanding on the culture, it is important. And then what we did for hiring is trying to leverage the people that we know for extending our network. So trying to make sure that we could do this due diligence of the people by hiring someone that has been recommended by someone that we know, if we can. Daniel, since worked on after the data center, he worked at Ingram Micro, which is a tech company related to the hardware, also cloud and so on. He knew quite a lot of people that was already acting as a proxy to meet potential hires. So that was very, very interesting. But also we tried to leverage digital channels and LinkedIn and so on. So we used this platform to generate also in some roles that we didn't have these connections, a nice deal flow of candidates that we can then, as a sales funnel and this fundraising funnel, try to qualify quickly and end up with a set of, I don't know, 4 or 5 that we could interview with the different managers in the regions and so on, and make sure that we could, that it can make sense. We also, we did a lot of I mean, I hired people that I didn't even know in person yet. No? So we have a lot of people now that, and especially since we closed the round very recently, that we haven't had a chance to meet in person. So you have to have a very either well background validation because of their network or because of their achievements in the past and so on, so that you can get this feeling of future performance, and then having these meetings, not only for interviewing, but also recurrent meetings in a day-to-day basis, depending on of course, on the people and the roles and so on. But having these sync meetings helped us a lot, keeping us in sync and in touch. So what we did is setting these like stand-up meetings that we used to do with engineering back in the day when we started and we were a smaller team. Now we did this stand-up meetings, like if it were an agile team for sales and for management, and we have these thinking meetings. Now we shifted them into a different time zone so that we can meet people from the US and also people from the Middle East and so on. But we have different time slots, and we try to combine these different recurring events so that we can get in sync, even though the overlapping time zones is minimal. So we have to deal with asynchronous communication, email, we have our, of course, chats and so on. And we try to keep in touch and keep scaling the team, trying to communicate the culture somehow subjectively by having these interactions more often. But yeah, we will face probably a challenge, or we are in these interesting times of scaling and growing, and we have to keep in mind the how we keep growing and hiring and setting this culture. So of course, this is an area of focus for us, and to make sure that everything is well aligned. But I think we are succeeding for now, and hopefully in the future. But for now, seems to work this way. But of course, we have to learn as everyone, because this is something new. So if anyone has any suggestion, please get back to me with something that works. But yeah, we have to improvise and move forward.
And so, I mean, it seems like, yeah, you guys, it seems like you guys have adapted your hiring process and also your I guess the team culture well to the remote work world. It seems quite on trend as well, because you guys have the showrooms. I think a lot of people have talked about, you know, HQ offices will still persist, but they'll be mainly kind of showrooms for external people to come in and kind of get a feel for the company. But actually, most people will spend their time working remotely. So I guess you guys are kind of on point there. Do you think that, given that you've adapted so well and you've seen the efficiencies that can come from remote working, but with this kind of this infrastructure of showrooms, I guess, will you continue? Will you plan strategically to continue working like this, or will you adapt back to the in-person approach when it's the right time?
I think that it makes sense to leverage the distributed teams, and this gives us a lot of outreach on the local culture, on the local partners. So I think it's beneficial for us to have this network of people distributed. Having a physical product, of course, means that we need some place where we can mess around with equipment and touch things and so on, and having engineers in the field and so on. So we will have certain locations where we will have factories or testing areas or showrooms, yep, physical showrooms, etc. But the developers, and depending on the engineer, of course, if they have to do something with something physical, they will be close to the facilities. But if they are maybe even in the front office side of things, marketing, sales, and so on, mm-hmm, they can be especially more distributed, and it's helpful for them to be distributed because they can reach out to the market quicker. So we plan to continue like this, but of course to have this also physical relationship with the people and so on, and the team, and generate this culture. We will probably try to set some either internal events or days that we can meet each other, mm-hmm, at least at the continent level or region level, so that we can, because we were used to do quite a lot of team activities every now and then, and this is something that we miss, and we would love to be able to combine the best of both worlds, having this every now and then closer relationship and so on, but the capillarity of reaching out to more people geographically and easier with this distribution of the teams.
Amazing. And do you have any kind of tips then for onboarding in this new remote world? Like, what have you guys been doing to ensure these people that you've not met so far at all, that you're hiring, and in the future as well, feel really part of the team as soon as they join and know what to do to upskill themselves? So
what we did is try to leverage this capillarity of people and managers that we trust. So what we did is, on one hand, what I told about either leveraging our network, or if we don't have access to particular skill sets, doing this hiring process through different channels that bring quite a lot of candidates that are targeted, and then when we can quickly get to the 5 whatever that we interview and in detail. But from there, we have like a set of advisors or very high level senior people that we trust them, that they have been very well engaged with us in such a way that we can use them as an extension of somehow the management team and the funders and so on, so that they can deeply evaluate if the people and the team is working well together per geography. They can have this interface between them and us, and we can share our thoughts. So having these advisor roles that basically have a lot of experience in the market and in this particular space, and also with very senior people, because in the end, we are a corporate, an enterprise company, or selling to enterprise companies, and we have to have an interface with the customer which is senior enough to generate this trust and to generate this experience. But in the inside, we have to be agile as a tech startup, scale up that is basically innovating and generating new products. So we have to have this bidirectional way of communicating, and we try to invest time, effort, resources, and so on in having very senior people in strategic locations that can help us guide these very senior guys. So we have a couple of roles, one in America as the ex-corporate vice president of Intel, and now also in terms of C-level, but more in the technical side, the ex-infrastructure director from Apple and Yahoo. And then on Europe, we have another very senior ex-Ingram, and also executives that can bring this overview and seniority to the team, and also get this feedback loop between the team members and us, and so on, and expand our culture in a safe way. But again, this is something that for enterprise companies like us, or not enterprise companies that have to deal with enterprises, may be useful. For, of course, B2C companies and more retail companies, probably doesn't make sense. But having someone that doesn't need to be very senior, but that you trust, that helps you orbiting in the region and generating this proxy of you in the region is very helpful.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end now, so I just wanted to say, it sounds like you guys are, hopefully you've been through your tough patch, fingers crossed. You guys have dealt with it really well. It sounds like there's some exciting times ahead. What does 2021 look like for you guys at the moment? Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty still in the world, but how are you guys planning for the year up ahead?
We face an exciting year because everyone expects to see the light out of the tunnel and the end of this pandemic with the vaccine and so on. So we are optimistic. We also have been preparing a very, I would say, solid pipeline of opportunities and so on. And the wait and see situation that we saw in some cases, of course, it was something that affected in the very short term. But as I said, we expect this to fuel our growth because of the focus on this technological side of things and infrastructure and so on, and remote communications. So under the sales perspective, we expect to see much more distributed deal flow of opportunities because we grew our sales team also in the different regions. So we now have more hands to deal with this pipeline. Before we had the problem of so much somehow inbound that we didn't or weren't able to handle with care and qualify properly. Now we have more hands, so we expect to have more capacity to reach out to these kind of customers. So we will see a pivot or a more increased diversification on the geographies of the market. And then on the other hand, we see the channel sales. So these partnerships that we've been able to establish, that we are now, or we've been able to learn a lot of the end-to-end sales cycle, and we took the opportunity of grabbing this know-how and transfer it to channel sales, so that we can leverage the sales force of third parties that have a perfect excuse with our technology to integrate other hardware and sell a bundle that it's beneficial for both, because they are basically selling more of their stuff while selling our stuff. So it is an interesting, I mean, not all companies will be a piece of a puzzle, but in our case, we are a piece of a puzzle. So we have to be aligned with the different stakeholders. And that's what we did during 2020, also being aligned with these different stakeholders so that we can bundle the technology and integrate it. And regarding the exciting project that we are doing now with robotics and so on, there is publicly a small teaser around YouTube or our website, I think, with the backplane and the robotic platform, where we are starting to deal with automation of the physical layer of the infrastructure, but we are working with exciting stuff also regarding engineering and the product portfolio for the hyperscalers and different kinds of customers that well require other things to, again, the mission of making them more sustainable, efficient, and powerful.
Amazing. I think that's a great way to end, and I would definitely encourage anyone who's watching this to keep track of Submer. I think you guys have got a big future ahead of you, and it's been a delight to chat to you today, and I've learned a lot. I've made a few notes as we've been going, and looking forward to hearing the feedback from everyone as they watch. But thanks so much, Paul, for your time, and have a great end to the year.
Thank you very much, Alex. Pleasure.
Thank you.